Hello everyone, before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It is quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let us get back to our main character. The gray sky hung low over downtown Seattle, rain streaking the glass of the narrow cafe where Lena worked the morning shift. She wiped down the counter, her hands trembling slightly from exhaustion. Her apron was faded, the name tag cracked, and the smell of roasted beans filled the air. It was supposed to be an ordinary Tuesday until the manager announced the news that would change everything. "We are closing next week," he said flatly. "The lease is gone, and the owner cannot afford the rent." Lena froze mid-motion, cloth in hand. This cafe was more than a job, it was the only place that had kept her afloat after months of hospital bills for her mother. Outside, rain blurred the neon reflection of the word home on the cafe window. It was the only word she whispered when she locked up at night. That afternoon, a man stepped inside, rain dripping from his coat, his gaze calm yet unreadable. He ordered a plain black coffee and sat in the corner without saying much. There was something in the way he looked at the place, like someone saying, "Goodbye," to an old friend. The next morning, Lena arrived early, half hoping the closure had been a nightmare. But the same man was already there, now in a navy suit, speaking quietly with the landlord. Her heart skipped when he turned to her and said, "Good morning, Miss Lena, right? I bought this cafe last night." She blinked, unsure if she had heard correctly. "You what?" He smiled faintly, sliding his business card across the counter. "Ethan Carter, Carter Holdings." The name meant nothing to her, but the way the landlord's expression shifted told her it was someone with power. "Why would you buy this place?" she asked, her voice trembling. "Because," he said simply, "it matters to someone who cares enough to fight for it." Then, as if the sentence were not strange enough, he added, "I have an offer for you, but it is not about coffee." That was the moment the story truly began. The day an exhausted barista met a man who could buy anything, but what he wanted most could not be purchased. In the hush of that empty cafe, with rain tapping softly against the window, Ethan looked at her and said, "Marry me." Think of it as a contract. The air seemed to stop moving. Lena stared, speechless, her heart pounding. "You are joking," she finally managed. "You do not even know me." Ethan's gaze did not waver. "It is not about love," he said quietly. "It is about trust. I need a fiancé for 3 months. In return, the cafe will be yours." He laid a sleek folder on the counter. Inside was a contract with her name already typed at the top. She wanted to laugh, to tell him this was insane. But when she saw the lease extension stamped with his signature, her laughter caught in her throat. For the first time in months, she saw a way out, a deal with the devil dressed in a tailored suit. Outside, the rain kept falling, soft and endless, like the ticking clock of a choice she could not avoid. 3 months, she whispered. "That is all?" 3 months, he confirmed. No feelings, no strings, just a contract. But as Lena picked up the pen, her fingers trembling, a single drop of ink smudged across the page, an accident that neither of them knew would mark the beginning of something real. The next morning, Lena walked into the cafe as if crossing into another world. Overnight, everything had changed. The old chipped menu boards had been replaced with sleek black chalk signs, the coffee machines polished to a shine. Ethan was standing behind the counter, reviewing a folder of documents as if he had always belonged there. He glanced up when she entered, his calm expression softening for a fraction of a second. "Good morning," he said evenly. "I hope you slept well." Lena crossed her arms. "Still trying to figure out if I am in a dream." Ethan closed the folder. "If you are, then I suppose I am part of it." He motioned toward a chair. "Please sit. We have details to finalize." The words felt unreal. She sat cautiously, her heart pounding. Ethan slid the contract toward her again. It looked even more official under the daylight, the embossed logo of Carter Holdings gleaming faintly on the cover. 3 months, he repeated. During that time, we appear in public as an engaged couple. You will attend a few events with me. Nothing more. Lena frowned. Why me? Ethan paused, studying her face. Because you were honest with me. Because you did not know who I was and still spoke your mind. He leaned back slightly. The board wants to see stability. They believe a man with a fiancé makes better decisions. Lena gave a short laugh. That sounds ridiculous. It is, he admitted, but it is real. His tone held no arrogance, only quiet truth. She looked down at the paper again, the ink mark from yesterday still smudged across her name. That mark, small and imperfect, somehow felt more honest than anything she had signed before. And the café, she asked. Yours, he said without hesitation, once the agreement ends. Her breath caught. You are serious. I do not make jokes about contracts. For a long moment, only the rain outside filled the silence. Lena took the pen and signed. Her hand trembled less this time. When she looked up, Ethan extended his hand across the table. Welcome to the strangest partnership of your life, he said quietly. Days turned into weeks. The transformation began fast. A stylist arrived at her tiny apartment with dresses she had never dreamed of owning. Public relations consultants taught her posture, speech, and the art of smiling without showing nerves. The first event came sooner than she expected, a charity dinner filled with glass chandeliers and people who spoke in polished half-sentences. She stood beside Ethan, pretending to belong, her heart racing each time someone greeted them as Mr. and Miss Carter. Ethan stayed composed, his hand occasionally brushing hers, grounding her without words. At the table, a senior investor smirked and said loudly, quite a leap from serving coffee to attending galas. A few chuckles rippled around. Lena felt her stomach tighten, but before she could speak, Ethan's voice cut through the air, calm but sharp. Everyone in this room started somewhere, he said. She just had the courage to start again. The laughter faded into silence. Afterward, when they stepped outside into the cool night, Lena exhaled shakily. You did not have to defend me. Ethan looked at her, rain glistening on his dark hair. I did not defend you. I told the truth. They stood under the awning, the city lights reflected in puddles around them. For a heartbeat, it felt like something real flickered between them, fragile and undeniable. Then Ethan glanced at his watch, breaking the spell. Your car is waiting, he said. She nodded, stepping away, but her pulse still raced. Back in her apartment, Lena stared at the dress folded neatly on the chair. Somewhere between contracts and appearances, the line between fake and real had started to blur, and she did not know if she was ready for what would come next. Weeks passed, and the illusion became routine. Each morning, Lena would meet Ethan at the entrance of Carter Holdings, walking beside him as cameras flashed and employees whispered. She had learned how to smile for the photos, how to shake hands with the confidence she did not feel, how to hold her chin just high enough to look like she belonged. But when the doors closed and the crowd disappeared, the silence between them returned quiet, charged, and strange. Ethan spent his days buried in meetings and documents, his voice steady and distant. Yet in the small moments, he let pieces of himself slip through. One night, when a board dinner ran late, Lena waited alone in his office. She wandered around the room, stopping in front of a framed photo on the shelf. It was Ethan as a teenager beside an older man with the same sharp eyes. When he entered, she turned the photo toward him. Your father, she asked softly. Ethan nodded, his expression unreadable. He built this company from nothing. When he died last year, the board made sure to remind me I am not him. His tone was calm, but there was a quiet pain beneath it. He believed that leadership without compassion destroys everything. I used to think he was being sentimental. He looked at her, the city lights behind him flickering in the glass. Now I am not so sure. Lena did not know what to say. She simply poured him a cup of coffee from the small pot she had made, setting it gently on the desk. Then maybe it is time to listen to him. Ethan looked at the cup, then at her, a flicker of something human crossing his face. You make it differently, he said. Not by the book. Maybe because I never read the book, she replied with a faint smile. The next morning, she found a new coffee machine installed in the cave, sleek, modern, and far too expensive. A small note was taped to it in Ethan's handwriting for the one who brews truth. Days blurred into a rhythm of shared obligations and quiet discoveries. Sometimes he joined her in the cafe after hours, sleeves rolled up, learning how to steam milk properly, his first attempts disastrous but his laughter genuine. You are terrible at this, she teased one night. I own the brand, not the skill, he said with a grin. The warmth between them began to feel dangerously real. At the next charity gala, reporters swarmed them again. But this time Ethan reached for her hand naturally, without thinking. Cameras caught it. The flash of light burned for a second too long. Later, in the car, Lena stared out the window, heart racing. You did not have to pretend that much, she whispered. Ethan's voice was quiet. I was not pretending. Her breath caught. For a moment, neither spoke. The city lights flickered past, casting gold across his profile. He looked almost peaceful, as if letting the truth slip out had freed him. But the illusion of safety was short-lived. The following day, gossip sites exploded with headlines: CEO Ethan Carter engaged to former cafe worker, fake or real. Photos of her in uniform, her old apartment, even her hospital visits with her mother flooded the internet. Lena's phone would not stop buzzing. She shut it off, her hands shaking. When she confronted Ethan, he was already on the phone with his legal team. I will handle it, he said, but his eyes betrayed guilt. Handle it, she snapped. This is my life, Ethan. My mother's privacy, my past. He stepped toward her, his voice low. I never meant for this to happen. No, she said, backing away, you just meant to use me. The words hit like glass breaking. Ethan froze, unable to find the right answer. For the first time since they met, Lena saw not the CEO, not the man in control, but someone lost. She walked past him, through the doors, into the rain. The contract still had weeks left, but in her heart, it already felt broken. The rain had not stopped for 2 days. Seattle's skyline blurred into gray, the same gray that now colored every corner of Lena's mind. She had not returned to the cafe, and she ignored every call from Ethan. Her mother noticed the shadows under her eyes but said nothing. At night, Lena replayed their last conversation until her chest hurt. She had called him a user, a liar, a man who treated people like contracts. Yet a part of her still wanted to believe there was something real behind the offer that changed her life. On the third morning, she walked by the cafe just to see it once more. To her surprise, the lights were off, and the sign was gone. The windows were covered with paper, the door locked. A note was taped to the glass closed for renovation, new beginnings soon. Her heart twisted. Ethan had vanished from her world, taking even the place where they met. Across town, Ethan sat alone in his high-rise office, the city stretching endlessly beneath him. The tabloids were still loud, but he had grown numb to the noise. The board had advised him to release a public statement denying any personal involvement with Lena. Instead, he had signed the cafe over to her name. It was now legally hers, even if she never knew it. He stared at the signed papers on his desk, the same ink mark still faintly visible on the bottom corner, the one that had smudged when she first signed their deal. That accidental mark had become a reminder that real things are never perfect. When his assistant entered with the day's reports, Ethan simply said, "Cancel the press conference." "Sir, that might worsen." "Cancel it," he repeated, his voice steady. That evening, he drove through the rain and stopped outside Lena's apartment building. He never got out of the car. He just sat there, watching the warm light through her window. Inside, Lena was making tea for her mother, her hands trembling when she saw the silhouette of a familiar car outside. She closed the curtain, unsure whether to run out or stay hidden. But the car eventually pulled away, leaving only the echo of headlights fading into the storm. Days turned into a week. Then, one Friday afternoon, Lena received an envelope without a return address. Inside was a single key and a handwritten note. Go see what truth looks like when it is not afraid. There was also an address: the Café. Her pulse raced as she made her way through the drizzle. When she reached the corner, her breath caught. The boards were gone, and the windows glowed with soft light. The new sign above the door read, "Home is a feeling café." Inside, the air smelled of fresh paint and roasted beans. The decor was the same yet different. The walls were lined with framed photos of the staff, of customers laughing, and in the center hung a photograph of a coffee cup with the faint ink mark of her signature printed on it. Beneath it, a plaque read, "The Real Deal." Ethan stood near the counter, sleeves rolled up, his hair slightly damp. He looked nothing like the CEO she had met. "You should sue me for emotional damage," he said softly, half a smile on his face. "Or at least charge me for false advertising." Lena's throat tightened. "Why did you do all this?" He looked at her, eyes steady. "Because I finally understood what my father meant. Leadership without compassion destroys everything. I lost sight of that until you reminded me." He took a slow step closer. "The café is yours. Always was. But I am hoping you might let me stay for the coffee." Tears stung her eyes. "And what about the contract?" He shook his head. "Expired. Unless you want to renew it this time without signatures." For a long second, the world felt still. Then Lena laughed softly through her tears. "Maybe we can discuss the terms over a cup." Ethan smiled, pulling out 2 mugs. "No lawyers, just honesty." As steam curled between them, the rain outside finally stopped. The storm had passed, leaving behind the quiet truth they both had been too afraid to name. What began as a deal had become something neither of them could define but both of them could finally believe in. Spring came early that year, and with it came a sense of quiet renewal. The café, once on the verge of closing, now thrived again. Every morning the scent of caramel espresso filled the air, and Lena moved behind the counter with calm confidence. The regulars returned, curious at first, then loyal again, drawn by the warmth of the place more than the coffee itself. Ethan still came by almost every day, though now he dressed more simply: no suits, no polished shoes, just rolled-up sleeves and a half-smile that carried both humility and peace. He worked silently beside her, fixing the grinder, carrying boxes, wiping tables when she was too busy. The customers often whispered, asking if they were together. Lena would only smile and say, "We are figuring it out." One morning, as sunlight streamed through the windows, she noticed Ethan standing near the corner table, gazing at the framed photo of the ink-marked contract. "You still kept it," he said. "Of course," she replied. It was the first time a signature actually meant something. He chuckled softly. "You mean when I tried to buy my way into your life?" "No," she said gently. "When you finally learned you could not." The words settled between them, warm and true. Over time, their partnership grew into something steadier, not built on conditions or appearances but on small acts: him remembering how she liked her coffee, her reminding him to take breaks. Ethan had started a new foundation in his father's name, one focused on small businesses and community cafes. When reporters asked why he shifted direction, he answered simply, "Because sometimes one honest cup can change an entire life." Months later, an invitation arrived for the grand opening of the foundation's first project. Lena helped plan the event, decorating it with coffee-themed artwork from local artists. The night of the launch, the room was filled with laughter and the soft hum of live jazz. She stood by the display featuring "Home is a Feeling" and watched Ethan step onto the stage. He spoke briefly about his father, about redemption, about kindness that costs nothing yet means everything. Then, as he ended his speech, he said, "There is one more story I have to tell." He looked toward her. "Once, a woman gave me something no deal could buy: faith. She taught me that love is not signed, sealed, or purchased. It is brewed, one honest moment at a time. A ripple of quiet filled the hall. Ethan walked down from the stage and stopped in front of her. In his hand was a small velvet box. "Lena," he said, his voice steady but full of emotion, "our contract expired months ago, but I have been hoping to renew something else." He opened the box to reveal a simple gold ring, engraved inside with 3 words, "Home is you." The crowd faded into silence. Lena's eyes glistened as she whispered, "You are sure this time there are no terms?" Ethan smiled. "Only one. Stay." She laughed softly, tears catching her breath. "Then consider it signed." The applause rose around them as he slipped the ring onto her finger. In that moment, the story that began with rain and a reckless deal found its quiet resolution under the glow of cafe lights. Later that night, after everyone had gone, they sat together at the corner table, sharing the last cup of coffee of the day. "You know," she said, resting her head on his shoulder, "you never told me why you stayed for the coffee." Ethan smiled, his voice barely above a whisper. "Because it finally tasted like home." And with that, the lights dimmed, leaving only the golden reflection of 2 cups side by side, proof that even the strangest contracts can lead to something beautifully real. The months that followed were filled with a quiet joy that neither Lena nor Ethan had known before. The cafe became more than just a place to work, it became a living symbol of second chances. People came not only for the coffee but for the feeling that lingered there, something soft and real that words could not quite capture. Lena and Ethan moved into an apartment above the cafe, the same building that had once held only her tired dreams and unpaid bills. Now it echoed with laughter, the smell of roasted beans drifting up every morning. They still argued sometimes about recipes, about business decisions, about who forgot to lock the back door, but those disagreements ended in laughter and late-night apologies over mugs of hot cocoa. One evening, as they closed up shop, Ethan leaned on the counter and watched her wipe down the tables. "Do you ever think about how this started?" he asked. She looked up and smiled. "Every day. You walked in and offered me a contract that made no sense." "It made sense to me," he said softly. "I just did not understand why." "And now," she teased. "Now I know," he replied, his gaze steady. "I was trying to buy time. Time to find what I was missing." She tilted her head. "And what was that?" "You," he said simply. Her cheeks flushed, and she threw the towel at him, laughing. "That is the cheesiest thing you have ever said." "True," he admitted, catching the towel, "but also accurate." Their life settled into a rhythm of warmth and purpose. Ethan spent part of each week mentoring small business owners through his foundation, often inviting them to the cafe to see where the idea began. Lena trained new baristas, teaching them not just the mechanics of brewing but the art of listening. "Every cup tells a story," she would say. "Make sure you serve it with respect." One Saturday morning, a familiar face appeared at the door, Mrs. Green, the landlord who had once threatened to close the cafe. She looked around, astonished at how alive the place had become. "You really turned it around," she said. Lena smiled. "It turned itself around. We just gave it a reason." Mrs. Green nodded slowly, eyes softening. "Your father would be proud," she told Ethan before leaving. The words lingered with him for the rest of the day. That night, after the cafe closed, Ethan walked outside to the quiet street. The city was peaceful, the rain long gone, replaced by the hum of distant traffic. Lena followed him, wrapping a scarf around her neck. "You are thinking about him again, aren't you?" she said. Ethan nodded. "He spent his life building something he hoped would outlast him. I think I finally understand. It was never about the company. It was about leaving behind something that made people feel they belonged." Lena slipped her hand into his. "Then you did exactly that." He looked at her, eyes warm with gratitude. "No," he said softly, "we did." They stood there, watching the lights from passing cars paint fleeting patterns across the windows of the cafe. Inside, the tables gleamed, and the framed photo of the ink-marked contract hung proudly near the door, a reminder of where they began. When they went back inside, Ethan turned the sign from open to closed, then added a small handwritten card beneath it that said, "Closed for the night, but always open for love." Lena laughed and kissed his cheek. "You are getting sentimental." "Only a little," he said, wrapping an arm around her. The world outside faded into a hush, and inside their small cafe, two hearts that had once collided by chance now beat in the same rhythm, steady, grounded, and true. What began as an agreement had become a home, and for Ethan and Lena, that was the only deal that ever truly mattered. Autumn came with golden leaves and a breeze that smelled of cinnamon and rain. The cafe grew busier as the season changed, its windows fogged with warmth and chatter. For Lena and Ethan, life had become beautifully ordinary, filled with small moments that made every day feel like a quiet miracle. Yet beneath that peace, both of them knew that comfort was never permanent. One morning, Ethan received a call from the board of Carter Holdings. They wanted him to return as acting CEO to help navigate a financial crisis that threatened hundreds of employees. He listened in silence, then hung up and stared out the window for a long time. That evening, he told Lena while they closed the shop. "They need me back," he said quietly. "Just for a few months." She paused, wiping her hands on a towel. "Do you want to go?" "I want to help," he admitted, "but I am afraid of losing what we built here." She walked over, taking his hand. "You will not lose it. You already found what matters. Just do what is right." He smiled, but his eyes carried the weight of old fears. Over the next weeks, Ethan split his time between the corporate world he once ruled and the cafe that grounded him. Every morning, he left before sunrise, and every night, he returned long after the lights of the city had dimmed. The strain showed, but Lena never complained. She brewed his favorite coffee, left food waiting for him, and whispered, "Welcome home," each night as he came through the door. One Friday, after a brutal day of meetings, Ethan returned to find the cafe dark except for one light above their corner table. On it sat a single cup, still steaming, and a note in Lena's handwriting: "Home is not a place. It is the person who waits for you." He sank into the chair, the exhaustion melting into quiet gratitude. When Lena appeared from the back, wearing her old apron, he looked up at her and smiled. "You kept it," he said. "Of course," she replied. "It is part of the story." He reached for her hand, the warmth between them soft and certain. "You are the only reason this story makes sense," he said. She leaned in and whispered, "Then promise me one thing: no matter how big the world gets, never let it make you small again." Ethan nodded, his throat tight with emotion. Outside, the leaves brushed against the windows, and the rain began to fall once more. They stood together behind the counter, two silhouettes framed by the glow of their small cafe. And in that moment, both of them knew that no matter how many storms would come, they had already found their forever shelter in each other. Winter arrived with its soft hush and the smell of pine drifting through the streets. Snow dusted the rooftops of Seattle, turning the cafe into a warm beacon of light amid the cold. Lena and Ethan had survived another year, stronger and more in sync than ever. The board crisis had ended successfully, and Ethan had officially stepped down for good, leaving the company in capable hands. But the demands of his departure had taken their toll, and for the first time in years, he felt the weight of exhaustion settle deep in his bones. One night, after closing, Lena found him sitting at their usual table, staring into an untouched cup of coffee. "You saved the company," she said softly. "Now you have to save yourself." He looked up, his expression weary but full of love. "Do you ever wonder if we were meant to meet that day? Or if I just got lucky walking into your world?" Lena smiled, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear. "Maybe both. Maybe fate needed a little luck." He chuckled quietly. "You always know how to make sense of chaos." She sat beside him, resting her head on his shoulder. "You taught me that chaos can still be kind," she whispered. "And that love does not have to be perfect to be real." The clock ticked softly, and outside, snow began to fall harder, thick and slow. The world seemed smaller, quieter, wrapped in the warmth of their silence. A few days later, on Christmas Eve, the cafe was filled with laughter and music. They had decided to host a free dinner for anyone spending the holiday alone. The tables were full, the smell of cinnamon and roasted coffee filling the air. Ethan moved between guests, serving food, laughing, shaking hands, looking more alive than he had in months. When the evening ended and the last guests had left, Lena turned to find him wiping down the same table where everything had begun. "You know," she said, smiling, "we never really had our own Christmas." Ethan looked up. "Then let us start now." He took her hand and led her to the center of the cafe. The lights were dim, the snow outside catching the glow of the street lamps. From the small speaker in the corner, soft music began to play. He wrapped his arms around her, and they began to dance slow, quiet, and clumsy, but perfect. "Do you remember what you told me when we signed that ridiculous contract?" he murmured. "That I was insane," she said, laughing. "Exactly," he whispered, pressing his forehead to her, "but you signed anyway." "I guess I was insane too," she said softly. They swayed together, surrounded by the scent of coffee and snow, the hum of the world fading beyond the glass. For a long moment, time seemed to stop, as if the universe itself had paused to watch two people who had turned a contract into a love story. And when the clock struck midnight, Ethan lifted her hand to his lips and said, "Merry Christmas, Lena. Thank you for teaching me how to stay." She smiled, eyes shining. "Merry Christmas, Ethan. Thank you for giving me a home." Outside, the snow kept falling, and inside the cafe, the last light burned gently over them, steady, golden, and endlessly warm. The following spring, the city bloomed again, and so did their life together. The cafe had become a landmark of quiet hope, its windows always glowing with golden light, its walls lined with photos of moments that mattered. Ethan and Lena had turned what began as a contract into something no legal paper could ever capture: a shared purpose, a life built one honest cup at a time. On the first anniversary of the cafe's reopening, the line stretched down the block. Local news crews came to film, calling it the place where love tastes like coffee. Lena laughed when she saw the headline, shaking her head. "They make it sound so poetic," she said. Ethan smiled. "Maybe it is." That evening, after the crowd had gone, they sat together by the window as the city lights shimmered across wet streets. Ethan reached into his pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper, the original contract they had signed, still marked by the smudge of ink that had started it all. "Do you know why I kept this?" he asked. Lena looked at the page, the corners worn, the words faded. "Because it reminds you of how far we have come?" "Because it reminds me that love is not supposed to be perfect," he said quietly. "It is supposed to be real." He took her hand, placing the paper between their palms. "You were the only thing in my life I never tried to negotiate." She laughed softly, eyes glistening. "Good," she whispered, "because this deal is non-refundable." Outside, the rain began again, gentle and steady, tapping against the glass like a familiar song. They sat there in silence, the rhythm of the storm syncing with their heartbeat. The cafe sign flickered softly in the reflection, "Home is a feeling." Years later, when people asked how it all began, Lena would smile and tell the story in her own quiet way. "He bought the cafe that hired me," she would say, "and stayed for the coffee, but it turns out, he stayed for me." The customers always smiled, some laughing, some tearing up, but every person who heard it left a little lighter. And sometimes, on late nights when the city slept, Ethan and Lena would still sit at that same corner table, 2 cups between them, steam curling like memories. "Do you ever miss the life you had before?" she asked once. Ethan shook his head. "That life taught me how to build an empire. This one taught me why it mattered." She leaned closer, resting her head against his shoulder. "Then I guess we are even." He smiled, watching the glow of the sign outside reflect in her eyes. "No," he whispered, "I am the lucky one." The rain kept falling, soft and endless, the same way their story began. And in the gentle hum of the night, the cafe stood as proof that sometimes, love does not arrive with fireworks or fatigue. It simply walks in, orders a cup of coffee, and never leaves.